Katu and Willamette University. This is Your Voice, Your Vote with Steve Dunn.
And welcome back to the program on this Father's Day. One of the big local stories we'll be following this week is the final vote on the City of Portland's $8.6 billion spending plan. That takes place on Wednesday. This was a tough budget given the multi-million-dollar shortfall and a big test for Portland's brand new city council. How will the budget changes impact you? That's always what we want to know. And joining me now is Katu investigative reporter Wright Gazaway, who's been closely following the city council's entire budget process. And Wright, so glad you joined us here.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, well, the new city council passed their first budget last week. Still one more vote to go. We expect any changes before the final vote on Wednesday at all?
We really don't. They can still make changes. It would just take 9 of the 12 councilors to agree, so no big changes expected this week. That's all done.
Let's talk about if no changes Wednesday, what are some of the key elements we see in the budget?
The big one is public safety, parks. They got the funding they were looking for, so no major cuts to the Police Bureau, which was one of the things people were worried about. The Parks Bureau also was able to get some money back for parks maintenance. That was one of the big issues with the mayor's proposed budget is the Parks Bureau took about $10 million worth of cuts. City Council was able to give some of that back through a number of different moves so that they could maintain the parks, keep the bathrooms open, keep them clean, keep the trees and grass clean so that people feel like they can go to the parks. That was a big thing we heard from the City Council was the issue they had with the mayor's budget was that it took a lot of hits to the parks maintenance, which they felt like would make the parks less safe. So those are the real key elements. Police and parks, it seems like, was so much of the conversation with City Council and trying to figure out how to balance some of those cuts across all those agencies.
We talked about Mayor Wilson wanted the additional funding for the Police Bureau. What happened there? Did they actually get any additional funding?
So there's a little bit of an interesting story there. So back in May, the City Council voted to take almost $2 million from police and give that back to the Parks Bureau for maintenance. In this last week's meeting, they actually had some leftover money from the Police Bureau that wasn't spent this year, so they were able to give some of that money back. The only difference here is that it's for public safety recruitment that all the public safety agencies can tap into. So that was recruitment money they took away and gave to the parks. They gave some recruitment money back and then opened it up to the public safety agencies. So the Police Bureau will still see a budget increase in this City Council budget.
So how did the Portland Parks fare in this budget then? So
they got about $4 million back for parks maintenance. They did that by moving some money from the tree regulation. That was a big point of contention with City Council. So they took about $2 million from tree regulation, the code enforcement of trees, and gave that to park maintenance, and they took that money from police. So the big theme we saw is that City Councilors wanted this budget to focus on maintaining the parks because they feel like that makes the community safe. The mayor and his proposed budget took a lot of cuts to park maintenance to save off cuts everywhere else. So this City Council wanted to give some of that money back to parks maintenance.
It sounds like Portlanders will be voting on a new form of funding for parks in the future.
So the Parks Bureau, interestingly, is funded about half by the general fund, which is the City Council. The other half is paid for by property owners in a parks levy. So it's a property tax, essentially. That is coming up for renewal. That funds about half of the Parks Bureau, so it's a big funding source for them. That was a big reason they faced so many cuts because we've talked about how the property values downtown have decreased, so those property taxes like the Parks Levy are not generating as much money. So the Parks Bureau took a pretty big hit there. That will come back up for a vote. It could be as soon as November of this year for property taxes to pay for parks.
Mayor Wilson talked so much about it when he was campaigning for mayor. Ending unsheltered homelessness in Portland by December. Did he get the money he's looking for to help with that?
So all that money stayed in the budget for his overnight shelter plan. They expanded some other shelters. So a lot of the mayor's plan was left in the budget. The big thing is that money came from outside sources. So he was able to get some help from Metro. He was able to get some help from the state legislature as well as from Governor Kotek. So he got about $25 million for his overnight shelter plan. So that helped the city not have to come up with that money for the plan. But all the things he proposed in his budget related to shelters and overnight shelters and homelessness stayed in the budget.
They had a huge budget shortfall. We're talking tens of millions of dollars. Actually surprised a lot of people when that was first released. How did they make up that shortfall?
That was the big thing we were interested in, was how are they going to make it up? And I think what we've learned as we've gone through this process is a lot of the bureaus ended up having money for this year that was not spent. So they were able to have about $35 million of money that wasn't spent this year that they were able to carry over. So that helped to make up a huge chunk. And then I mentioned the state funding that the mayor was able to get for the shelter. So that was able to decrease the number of cuts they had to make. And then they made up about a third of the deficit just with those general fund cuts, park maintenance, different things across different city bureaus. So they were able to ward off the worst by saving some money from this year and taking it to next.
So Portlanders, they're probably sitting at home right now saying, what is this going to mean for me? What am I going to have to pay additionally than what I pay now? What does this look like for them? There
were some fee increases that have generated some headlines. One of the big ones is if you ever ride Uber or Lyft, you pay right now 65 cents a ride. That will go up to $2 a ride, and then that money will go to the Bureau of Transportation. There were also some changes to your water and sewer bill. That will go up about 6%. And then there were parking increases. If you park downtown or anywhere across town, all those fees went up 25%. That money will also go to the Bureau of Transportation. So and there's some fees for parks and stuff. So those are the big differences. Your water and sewer bills will go up. If you use those rideshare companies, your bills will go up, and then the parking downtown is the big one.
Brand new city council. We have 4 different districts, 12 councilors now. What does the outcome of the vote tell us about how they were able to get along in this?
I would say outside of the votes related to the police bureau's budget, it was pretty amicable. I mean, it got contentious there when they were talking about when they took the money from police and gave it to parks. That was really probably the most tense moment. There was some other back and forth related to police overtime and what to do with that. So long as they weren't talking about police, it seemed like there was pretty much agreement on, hey, we need to find ways to make the government more efficient. We need to cut out the redundancies, and you would see people vote like that. So I think that there was a lot of good working together. It really just got sticky around the police, which we come to expect.
I give you a lot of credit. I look over right, sitting at his desk. He's got his headphones on, watching the city council budget meeting.
The key is 2 times the speed, so I cut it in half. 5.5 hours to watch an 11-hour meeting. I just talk very fast.
I'm glad somebody's able to do it. I'm glad it's you. Katu Chief Investigative Reporter Wright Gazaway is here. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it very much.